Doing well, my brother. How are you feeling?
I'm good. I'm good. Life is amazing. Life is abundant. So I was looking at our show notes for today, and you put this actually in the drive, adding mass to ether. So please explain.
Here's a funny story. I put that in there several weeks ago. So when
Yes.
I got your text message, I was like, man, what is Rich talking about?
so you see, so
But
you forgot about it. Yes.
thankfully, I was prepared because I remembered I was reading something at that time period. So, what if I told you you could create matter out of nothing, like literally pull something out of thin air? What would you think about that?
Well, I believe in the laws of physics, and then the next steps of physics is, like quantum physics, and so most things are not realized until it's observed. So, so it can be either a solid or it could be a gas, it could be a liquid. But once you observe it, then it becomes real. Then it becomes realized as either a solid gas or liquid, or a solid, yeah, solid gas or liquid. Yes.
Yeah. That you right. I knew you would get it. That was something to me that it felt like almost something out of sci-fi or out of a Marvel movie, but
Hmm.
you just conceptualized it perfectly because modern science has always talked about a thing changes once it's observed. So the question of how do you turn mass or how do you get mass out of the ether? How do you add mass to ether? One of the things we look at first is what mass is. So I want to write this one down, starting with the concept again. How do we add mass to ether? Another way to say it is engineering reality at the level of energy and fields. So, mass, by definition, is a coherent, typically large body of matter with no definite shape. An intrinsic property of a body generally defined as the strength of an object's gravitational attraction to other bodies. Now that's a lot going into what mass is, but it get those of us that remember our high school science remembered mass. Now ether, which is a Latin word, and it means the upper, pure, bright air. In the 19th century, physicists called it the fifth element, a substance that fills all space and makes up all bodies. Now, the spiritual space says it's the substance in which we live, move, and have our being, and out of which can be made whatever we desire. So, these are a couple different definitions that we're working with and think about how do we add mass to ether. So going back to what you said earlier, Richard, what does that now sound like to you?
It sounds like that we always think of, like, I guess, transformation as a physical thing, but it's really a mental thing, a spiritual thing. And so I think that's what you're hinting at. Is that what you're hinting at?
I'm not hinting at anything. I'm really discovering because as I read this in the past, and I had conversations like we're having now, people have added their knowledge to my understanding, and it kind of helps me wrap my mind around it a little bit more. But you're absolutely right. I Transformation did resonate with me as well. I always think about in the Bible when it talks about God told Adam to go out and name the wild things. Now, I've heard
Mm.
somebody say, well, the wild things we always assume would just give the animals names. But someone said, well, if you think about the world, the universe, everything was new at that moment in time. So the wild things could have been everything else outside of what God had already created, meaning that Adam had the power to speak and things became. They
Hmm.
said we were made in God's image, God's the creator, we're creator. So when you take these different concepts, it's kind of like, man, how do you add mass to ether? It's like how do you transform these things and how do we tap into that? Not anything to be wizards and warlock. I'm not talking about that, but definitely as it relates to how we transform ourselves, our mental, which in turn transforms our reality.
Well, yeah, I think that's what it is. Like you said, like, and that is kind of like one of the laws of physics, was quantum physics, but which is now has been now mainstream physics, is that things are not realized until it's observed. And so,
Mhm.
like, if you have a negative mindset about everything, you see the bad in all things, and then what's going to happen in your life? You're going to encounter more and more bad things. The things are still the same, but you're just so focused, your attention is so focused on all the bad things in your life, that's all you will see. But in the reverse, or the opposite side of that pendulum, or that pole, is that if you see the good in things, and you're grateful for all things, your reality be full of good things and full of things that you're grateful for. So I think like I do want to get into like a little bit of wizardry and the Kabbalion. Are you familiar with this text, the Kabbalion?
I am. I am.
So the Kabbalion talks about, there's no difference in things. It's only a matter of degrees. So hot and cold is the same thing. It's just a matter of degrees. So if you're in a room and you're saying it's cold, it's cold, it's cold, it's cold all the time, you're gonna feel cold, even though there is a physical element to it. But people like Wim Hof, who do like the ice baths and stuff like that,
Hmm.
they
Right.
they do the breath work, and they do the mental mindset shift to let themselves be in a very calm state. So no longer are they feeling the cold, they're feeling it as a very comfortable temperature. And so and that's what the Kabbalion says, that the Kabbalion says that the whole universe is mental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think has been consistent in all my studies, esoteric history, that the common thread has been that the world and the reality that's being created is coming from here. Now,
Mm.
collectively, it is really what gives it the momentum and make it big. But I think about my favorite book. It says, "With two or more gather in my name, I'm there." And my creator has always been described. One of the characteristics is everything, all things. So it makes sense to me that this ish has a truth in it. That if all things exist, just different degrees, and my perception affects my reality, then I know this up here has to be checked. This up here has to be developed. This up here, has to be guarded. Because how
Mm.
easy is it for me to start thinking, like you said earlier, today is going to be a bad day. Oh man, nothing's going to work out for me today. And then begin to see everything not working out for me versus saying, look at how many times things worked out for me. I got in my car and it didn't crash not one time, not even
Mm.
cars around me. You know what? When I went to my sink and I turned that water on, would you believe,
Mhm.
Rich, man, water came out, brother. I'm
Yeah.
grateful for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, there's also a bias. What is it called? I think it's the Gestalt principle. I have to look this
Mm,
up. We'll put it in the notes. But it's a form of confirmation bias. And so,
yeah.
like, say, like, I'll give you an example. So I bought a Jeep. That was my last car before I bought my new SUV. But I
Okay.
had a Jeep, and I rarely saw Jeeps out on the road. But as soon as I bought a Jeep, all I saw was Jeeps everywhere. I'm like,
Yep.
oh God, so many people have Jeeps. So that's the kind of confirmation bias that goes on when you have that. If you have a negative predisposition to start your day, you're going to see all the negative things that's going on in the world. Yeah. So
You'll see it very clearly.
yep. And so I think that's why, like, people like, who are like a lot of these, I ain't gonna call them gurus, but all these self-help teachers and guides such as Tony Robbins, they talk about it's so important first thing in the morning to prime your, not only your body but your mind, to be into a state of abundance, in a
Yeah.
state of vitality, in a state of positivity. A lot of times if you're waking up scrolling, looking at the news, you know, it's just like, I mean, it's going to set your day on down a bad trajectory, or at least your
Every time.
perception, because everything will probably else in the reality, everything else probably stays exactly the same, but your perception of things will go down the wrong trajectory. And I
Absolutely.
believe, and I do believe in the laws of attraction, that take it
Hmm.
a step further, is that if you have that bad mindset, not only will you see all the bad things in the world, you'll start gravitating toward all those bad things, and actual physical bad things will start happening to you. Mm.
Hmm.
So So it is a domino effect.
Inside of the definition of mass,
Hmm.
I'll read it said an intrinsic property of a body, generally, this is the part, generally defined as the strength of an object's gravitational attraction to other bodies.
Hmm.
And like we talked about, you begin to attract things to you because we already said mass and matter, these things had gained their, their what they are through our observation.
Hmm.
So now we look at once they become mass. I'm probably saying this all crazy, so but the sense of it is that, man, we attracting stuff to us. It's like
Hmm.
it's our attitudes and our thoughts are bringing those things closer to us. So when we say
Hmm.
how to add mass to the ether, you got to check up in here. You got
Hmm.
to understand that, one guy said ether is energy fields. So how
Hmm.
easy is that for understand, man? That's a bad vibe you bringing over here.
That's definitely true, but it is, but it's deeper than that also, because we think
It is.
it is all mental, but a lot of things like the mentality is very just like the tip of the iceberg. The subconscious really controls our perspective so much, and that subconscious is created from not only us, from our parents' injuries, our parents' trauma, our parents' situation, our upbringing, our parents' parents, our parents' parents, our parents' of parents, all the way back to when we were slaves and beyond. And so,
Mm-hmm.
that's why I see like a lot of African Americans, they may not have the shackles on physically, but they still have the shackles mentally because of what's so embedded in their subconscious from the days of slavery. And even though we're getting farther and farther, further and further removed from slavery, still it still lingers in a lot of communities where, especially like in the South, and I know you live in the South, where people have been in that bubble for hundreds of years. They've never been to the big city. They never traveled before. All
Yep.
they know is like their great parents knew the plantation. Their great parents knew sharecropper. Now they're all they know is the block and slanging drugs on the block. So it's just the same plantation with different dynamics in a slightly different scenery.
That's it. Just a little bit of a different scenery,
Yes.
and that's why it's difficult, I believe, or see, like you say, that for some people to see that they need to change or that change is even possible.
Hmm.
Exposure and those things give you different
Exposure.
insights.
Yes, exposure. And I think that's why traveling for me, I'm a big traveler. I think traveling definitely gives people like the best education. Because I think a lot of times people are just, and I'm not, university is a great education. I love university, but like traveling, when you get to see other people, and I'm not talking about going on a cruise to Mexico and just staying on a cruise and eating all you can eat and drinking all you can drink. I'm talking about going to like Mexico and actually hanging out in the city and see how people live their everyday life, going to
Hmm.
different countries in Europe, going to Asia, going to see these places and see how other people function, how other people operate, their energy, their vibe, and then it shifts your perspective. And then also, what I would do, before I travel, I get the Duolingo and just try to learn the language, at least be conversational in it, because like learning languages also helps our plasticity in our brain, because like as we get older, our neuroplasticity just becomes more hardwired. We become more stiff mentally and not flexible in thinking. But when we learn a new language, when we learn a new skills, that promotes more neuroplasticity in our brain. So we start seeing things more differently. We be more open to new things. We have more of a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset.
Say that again.
And
Or
so it's
more of a
about having
growth mindset.
not a fixed mindset. Yes.
Yeah, that is. I got a friend of mine. Shout out to Brad's Bright Lights. If you're in Detroit and need an electrician, Brad's your guy. but he
Okay,
posts.
Brad.
But he posts on social media. He's using Lingo, one of those apps to learn Spanish. And I think he's on day 863 now. But point of it is,
Uh-huh.
everything that you're saying are great, perfect, because our brain, once we get locked in, you can't see anything else. In the Bible, it says you'll get what's called a reprobate mind. You get to a point where it's kind of like you can't learn anything new. You can't see the world differently,
Hmm.
and you truly get locked into that matrix of thinking. And I think
Exactly.
that's a part of design. Last week we were talking about managing your nervous system. The
Hmm.
week before that we were talking about Epstein, but it all kind of ties in from the standpoint of we have to be intentional about the reality and the world that we're creating and be accountable to doing the things that we control.
Yeah,
I always admired your platform because I know I can tap in, and if I want to learn something about yoga, a breathing exercise, a stationary exercise I can do in my chair. Your brand is consistently sharing that knowledge and information. So
well, thank you.
appreciate you for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you for following first of all, because that's you all make it happen. So and y'all inspire me to keep on going. But and that's why I do want to give a plug for yoga too, because like if your body is stiff and stagnant too, it's all connected. Your mind, you have for me, I believe it's a mind body spirit connection. That's why yoga is
Yeah.
so good. Moving your body in a multi-dimensional way trains your not only your body but your brain, your neuroplasticity, that other things are optional. I grew up in Detroit. I played a lot of basketball, a lot of football. I used to be so stiff, dude. I couldn't do anything, dude. Like, and
Mm.
I was rupturing my tendons in my knees. I was, breaking ankles and stuff like that. Not other people's ankles. I was breaking other people's ankles too, but my own ankles, because just the fact that I was just so stiff and I had no mobility. And then that's the main reason why I got into yoga. But not only did it make my body more flexible, it made my mind much more flexible. And like I'm 51 years old now, and I'm in the best shape of my life because of
Wow.
because of because the way I train, the way of being more open, more flexible about trying new things, and just being open. I think so many people get stuck in just their rut, and it's nothing wrong
Yeah.
with a rut also, because we are creatures of habits, and
Yes.
sometimes and sometimes you get the economy of scales if you do things over and over and over and over again.
Yep.
But uh,
Yep.
but it's like this book, like who stole my cheese? Are you familiar with this book?
Oh yeah. Who moved my cheese?
Who moved my cheese? That's what it is.
Yep.
So
Matter of fact.
if yeah,
Oh.
so something, so habit and doing things is good, but
Yep.
also being flexible is great too. Cause like sometimes your habits are not going to give you any fruit anymore. It's not going to be You're not going to be successful with your habits. So you got to pivot. You got to shift. You got to do something different. But some people are still, like, oh, what the frick I'm going to do? What the frick I'm going to do? I can't do this. I'm working hard. I'm working. You're doing the same thing over and over. Maybe you need to pivot. You need to do something different now. And
Man,
not only within relationships, but also with your job, with everything. You have to be open.
it's so far. I was sharing that with someone earlier today,
Mhm.
and I think about this kind of like they say, people say, "What Kenya? What do you do?" I get that question so much. They're like, "What do you do?" I said, "I'm Tommy. I don't do nothing." But the things that I do that are not paycheck oriented are those things
Mhm.
that kind of bring me more joy in that flexibility. Because at work, complaining about your job, complaining about the people at work, I say, you know what? I need my job, I need money. So complaining about them, they're not going to change. But how I show up in life can change if I look at, well, what's my issue there? Or what can I do better, or what am I not doing? I know for myself, one thing, I love to cook, very passionate about cooking. And I found out, like, legitimately, that's like, people say want to grab a drink or they want to do this. I said, man, I get in the kitchen and cook something, I kind of reset. I feel better about myself. If I get in,
Yep.
go into my little home studio, make a little beat, a little rat tat
I
tat,
love
yeah,
love the
feel better
music.
about myself, you
I love the
know.
music. Yes, yes, yeah, yeah.
So
But
it's having those different things. So when you do have to pivot, or you can't necessarily pivot out of that because of a career, we're at an age now, we're kind of in it, but pivoting, finding other ways to express what you got in you.
for sure. But you know what? It is open, because I know a lot of people have been laid off, especially a lot of people that are in tech that are in their 40s and 50s. But it is a good time for them to learn to pivot too, because
Yeah.
a lot of those tech jobs are leaving because of AI, and AI can do it so much quicker and so much more accurate than they can. So, that's just the nature of our reality. So I mean, you got to always be able to change. Colonel Sanders didn't really get going until he in the 60s with KFC. So, you know, you know, I think being open to change is important, and embracing change.
Hmm.
And then so it's like the Buddhists have this way of talking about their job and stuff like that. About like some people hate their jobs also, and that's a big thing. And we hate our jobs, but the Buddhists say, like, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything.
Everything.
So
Yep.
if you don't like your job, do it differently, do it with intention, do it with love, and then that'll radiate through the rest of your life. You know what I'm saying? That'll radiate through in other areas of your life. So,
So true. I had a sales job at one time, and I was basically recruiting students to go to school. So I'm on
mhm,
the phone, heard you want to go to school, heard you want to go to school. And that was a very frustrating job at times because nobody wanted to go to school or they wanted to go to school, couldn't get financial aid. And if you're
mm,
being compensated by, how many students you enroll, there's an incentive there for somebody to enroll. So when they're not enrolling, it didn't really feel good. Salespeople, if you're not selling nothing, that workday just got very long. But
yep,
like Buddha said, figure out how to do your work a different way, a more excellent way. And one of the things that I said, you know what? My boss may come in here and he may see that my numbers aren't high, but he's going to come in here and see that I was a cheerleader for the team. I was rooting for everybody else. If anybody needed some assistance, I would help out. Because my mindset was if you add
mhm,
value to the environment that you're in, you're going to be okay. Just
yeah,
make sure you're looking at what kind of value that you're adding. So my attitude about my work was I might not be winning over here, but I had some opportunities to win over here. And I started out as at a very low level. And my final level, I was a regional over multiple schools, and
mhm,
I can contribute 100% because I said this to somebody recently who's in that role that I was in. I said, look, they may not be doing everything that they're supposed to do. I said, but find another way to bring value. Find you got gifts and talents. What can you
mhm.
do? And I believe that when you're able to do that, you'll be able to add mass to the ether.
Exactly, and that goes into going back to the having the right attitude to be successful in life, and and realizing greatness is like having an attitude of serving versus what
Yeah,
can I get out what can I get out of something. A lot of times we always try to say, what can I get out of this job? What can I get? But what about what kind of value can you bring to not only the company but to your coworkers and to everybody else and to your environment? And I think
absolutely.
it's unfortunate we do live in a society that is very, not everyone is like that, but it is one
Mhm.
of the big narratives of being, being self-consuming instead of being community serving, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and I believe everywhere we go is our community, and we have to what how can we make this community, how can we make the world a better place? How can we make our community a better place? That's what I always ask myself everywhere I go. My father did made me do this when I was young. Like, I would like litter. He's like, I was like, oh, he's like, oh, I pick it up, like, oh, I'm sorry. He said, why did you litter? I said, well, because it's litter everywhere. I said, what? Let's say, so what can you do to make the world a better place?
Yeah. Yep.
So are
Yep.
you making a
I had a
place?
grandfather.
You
I'm sorry.
I say you making a place a better place or worse place by putting more trash on the ground.
Mhm.
So yeah.
I had a grandfather, he had 8 kids, and his 8 kids had 1 million kids. So it was a bunch of us. And
Mm,
he would say, what is your name and what have you
mm,
contributed to this world?
yeah.
And then like I said, I'm glad to hear that you had a similar family orientation. But the truth of it is we know a lot of people, many people did not get that kind of orientation. So they're kind of in a space where what can I get out of this world? What can I get out of it? Never,
Yeah.
that's not a sustainable thought process. There's nothing sustainable about being selfish. Nothing.
There's nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
One of the things that I would indict folks that you can't change a system that people secretly are only mad that they're not benefiting from it.
Mm-hmm.
They're not mad at the system. They're just mad that they're not benefiting from it. Because if they're benefiting
Exactly.
from it, they're like, I don't see the problem with everything. I'm good.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's why it's
Yeah.
important to keep people at a certain, like if pain is here, keep people here. You keep
Mm-hmm.
right, they'll be all right. Don't let them go up here because they start
Yep.
wanting what you got. Don't let them come, or I'm saying, don't let them get down here because they start taking what you got. And of course, you can't let everybody be at the top. But if you keep them right there, they'll complain, but they ain't gonna change. But they really want to be there. But when they get down here, they want to start
Mm-hmm.
taking. They ain't trying to be a part. They coming to take. So we have to look at why minimalism is such an effective movement. Why is our homesteads and people growing their own food? Because you can't control
Mm-hmm.
those people.
Yeah, you can't. No, you can't.
You can't
I agree.
control them.
No, I agree. But minimalism, I'm a big fan of being a minimalist. I think I mean, in minimalism is just not only about products, but just about with everything, about
Hmm.
the way, like, how much information we're consuming. Some people, I know, all they do is read audiobooks all day, every day. It's like you're not living, you're not interacting with people. Some people are just talking all the time just to be talking and not even like listening or being a part of a conversation. So I think being a minimalist with in all aspects of our lives is such a potent tool.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'm starting.
yeah.
Lately, this may sound odd, but lately I've been considering how monks live. You get
Mm.
older, so you're not running the streets as much as you used to. You're
Yeah.
not doing different things, so it's kind of like, well, you know what? Peace and solitude ain't that bad. I mean, I can think clear, and my creativity is a little bit more, in tune. So,
Uh-huh.
to be a part of everything, how can you really be a part of anything?
Mm, that is true. Because when you're running around like a wild animal, you can't appreciate anything. And it's true. And I noticed that also in myself. Yeah. So sometimes I have that what they call FOMO, fear of missing out. But
Oh,
when you have FOMO, you miss out on everything. Instead
ooh.
of just maybe just taking that one moment just to like sit there and actually enjoy the meal that you're eating right there and there, or just breathe in this fresh prana, this fresh air right here and now. We kind of it's easy to miss that when we're fear of something else over there.
That is a very that created a lot of anxiety for me, man. I remember Friday
Mm.
nights.
No,
It was kind of I
yeah.
had to be out.
For sure. And then you gotta make sure you go to the right spot. So it's not like just out like which spot is the right spot. Or maybe I can do two spots or three spots. And like I'm rushing from one spot to the other. And it's like actually if I had stayed in one spot, that one girl was kind of like on me, but I kind of like rushed out because I had to go to the other spot so bad. And then nothing happened at the other two spots. And like I could have just stayed at the first spot and really enjoyed the first spot. you know. But that's the story of a lot of our lives.
That's 100% the story.
yeah.
That's a
Yeah,
hundred
but
percent story.
the reality of the situation is that is the nature of humans. We are curious. That and that curiosity is what made us maybe rise above Neanderthals and other life forms because of the fact that we were curious. We always want to see what else was out there, but as we live in a much more modern society, there's too much out there now. So we got to find that more internal balance to make sure that we can kind of curb our enthusiasm just a little bit so we can enjoy and be present in the moment. So,
Exactly. And,
yeah,
and I think that brings us back to adding mass to ether and the
yeah,
definition that I led with, not that engineering reality at the level of energy and fields. Being that minimalist, slowing down, don't eat food, taste food, just smell the fresh air. You said letting that prana come into you. These are things that I believe that when we become intentional, our realities will shift and change. And I'm a firm believer that if joy, let's just use joy, if you're doing all the right things in the right combination, I believe you're going to have a certain amount of peace and joy in your life. I think that
mm-hmm,
that's just going to be happening because even if something bad happens to you, you're going to have an attitude of gratitude. So even still, you'll have a strength that brings you through it. So if we start being intentional about those things, the reality that we live in is what changes. Trying to change the world without changing Kenya, I found out, is that you can actually get paid off of trying to change the world, because it's kind of like the world don't really want to change. So they keep paying you because they say they want to change, but they really don't want to change. It's the perfect
yeah,
scam because the
yeah,
real form of change, and I've heard this before, but the real change comes from the inside. It starts
mm,
right there. And if you're not changing the inside, there's nothing, I believe, that's going to have the lasting change, the necessary to give you that consistent peace and
mm-hmm.
joy. You know,
And so and I'll end on this note to quote the great Michael Jackson: starts with the man in the mirror.
absolutely, absolutely. It starts with
Peace,
oh
everyone.
man,
Okay, see
uh,
y'all next time. See you next time, Kenya.
indeed. Take care, everybody.
Peace.